When the registrar asked who had authorized the movement of the loan pieces, the room went still. Gavin Holt was still holding a champagne glass in one hand. He had introduced me 10 minutes earlier as backroom help. The cobalt vault fob was sitting on the black linen table between us when his face changed. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to say this. Hidden Revenge Stories is a channel about independent people. They rise above pain, betrayal, and hardship. They take back control of their lives. These stories are inspired by real experiences. They are fully reimagined. You will only hear them here. If this story speaks to you, leave your thoughts in the comments. If you have a story of your own, feel free to share it. It may become a new story here. Your story might give someone else the strength to keep going. Now let me show you how this one began. My name is Claire Rowan. I was 44 when Gavin Holt decided I was decorative enough to use and small enough to erase. I had worked at the Halcyon Theatre Archive in Adelaide for 11 years. If you have never seen the place, picture an old theater that refused to die. Red velvet seats, gold trim gone dull around the edges, a narrow fly tower, paint that always smelled faintly warm in summer. The archive sat behind it all. Not glamorous. Climate doors, steel racks, acid-free boxes, a conservation bench under white light. That was where I spent most of my days, with silk, wool, beads, feathers, stage dust, and old sweat sealed into hems from productions that had outlived the people who wore them. I was the senior textile conservator. That meant I repaired damaged costumes. I wrote condition reports. I checked humidity. I approved movement. I trained casual staff not to ruin 100 years of theater history by grabbing a sleeve the wrong way. It also meant I knew exactly which pieces were real and which pieces donors preferred to romanticize. My mother had been a dresser in the same building. Not famous. Not high-ranking. She steamed costumes in the wings and pinned cuffs with a thimble in her mouth when the actors were late. When I was a girl, she used to sit me on a folding chair near wardrobe and tell me the theater only looked magical because someone stayed after everybody clapped and put things back in place. That stayed with me. Maybe too much. I lasted in rooms longer than I should have because I was raised to believe quiet work would eventually be seen. For years it was. Then our old director retired. The board hired Gavin Holt, 38, smooth voice, tailored navy suits, teeth so even they looked rented. He had never conserved a thing in his life. He came from fundraising. That was all anyone said at first. It turned out to be enough. The first time I met him, he stood in the conservation lab doorway with a coffee he should not have brought past the barrier line and said, "So this is where the moth whisperer works." I looked up from a beaded bodice on foam supports. "I'm Claire." He smiled like I had confirmed something for him. "Right, Claire, you keep the old things standing." That was his first skill. He reduced people before he learned their names. In the first month, he started changing language. The archive became content. The collection became assets. Donors became stakeholders. Our centennial year was coming up, and he talked about it the way miners talk about a seam they had found. He wanted a major donor gala, a touring exhibition, a state grant, interstate press, board applause, a new title for himself by Christmas. At the start, I thought I could work around him. That had been my method, through a failed marriage, budget cuts, and 3 boards. Keep your head down. Do the work. Outlast the loud people. Then I walked through the foyer one Monday morning and saw the first wall mock-up for the centennial exhibition. A long cream panel with gold lettering. Founders. Directors. Major donors. Creative team. Collection leadership. Under collection leadership, my name was there, but not my title. It said wardrobe support. Wardrobe support. 11 years of conservation reports. Emergency stabilization. Grant preparation. Lender negotiations. Training volunteers who arrived with acrylic nails and confidence. And on the wall, I was wardrobe support. Gavin was standing nearby with the designer. He glanced over at me and said, "Looks cleaner this way. The public does not need the back end," in technical language. I said, "My title is Senior Textile Conservator." He took a sip of coffee. "You know that. I know that. The donors need a simpler story." That was the moment I stopped thinking of him as careless. Careless men correct themselves when they are told. He was not careless. He was building a version of the building where I existed only when he needed labor. I should have pushed harder then. I did not. I told myself it was one wall, one line, a bad choice. I had not yet understood that Gavin always tested the edge before he crossed it. The centennial year should have belonged to the collection. That was the bitter part. We had pieces people actually cared about. A touring soprano gown from 1931, a wartime chorus uniform altered and altered again because no one could afford new cloth, a hand-painted cape from a production every donor in South Australia claimed their grandmother had seen. History sits differently in textiles. You cannot fake sweat marks. You cannot invent where a body once bent a seam. You can only preserve it or ruin it. I spent the first 6 weeks of that year doing the real work. Checking fiber weakness, reinforcing net, matching thread by lamplight, writing condition notes in language lenders and insurers would accept. Gavin spent those same weeks doing meetings. He would appear in the lab just long enough to ask for a stronger phrase. Can we say museum grade? We're not a museum. Can we say world class? Not unless the lender says it. Can we make the damage sound less fragile? The damage is fragile. He started taking my reports to donor lunches. At first he asked. Then he stopped asking. I found my own sentences in his presentation deck on a screen outside the boardroom. While I waited to be called in for technical questions he never actually let me answer. One afternoon, I walked in just as he said, "Our archive team has done beautiful work." Archive team. No name. No title. My chart's on the wall behind him. He saw me through the glass and kept talking. After the meeting, one of the board members, Marianne Cole, touched my arm lightly and said, "Your materials landed very well." Materials, not expertise. I smiled because women my age in institutions learn early how to smile with their molars. The second insult came 3 weeks later. The lender from Melbourne was due to send 2 loan pieces for the gala. Both were fragile. Both required acclimatization and a named custodian on arrival. That last part mattered. Named custodian was not an honor word. It was the person who signed for condition, placement, movement, and emergency response. In our institution, that had been me since our accreditation review 4 years earlier. Our former director insisted on it because he knew the board loved spectacle and forgot responsibility. The second flash photography entered the room. The paperwork had been lodged with the State Indemnity Office. I had signed the last 3 annual renewals. Gavin had copied me on exactly 1 email about it and not read the attachment. I knew because he replied, "Thanks, looks straightforward." Nothing involving state indemnity is straightforward. The clue was there. He just had no use for clues that did not flatter him. 3 days before the Melbourne crates arrived, Gavin moved my office. He called it temporary restructuring. The donor relations team needed a visible workspace near the foyer. My room, which sat between the archive corridor and the freight lift, was apparently more strategic. He had my boxes carried downstairs to a narrow room beside maintenance. No window, one flickering tube light. The old key cabinet humming through the wall. He stood there while the last carton came in and said, "You do your best work away from distractions, I'm told." I said, "You moved the person who signs movement authorizations away from the freight path." He put both hands in his pockets. "You make everything sound dramatic." "No, I make it sound precise." He smiled. There it was again, that slight lift at one side of his mouth that said he had already translated me into a type. Useful. Rigid. Not dangerous. The third insult happened in public. A donor couple from Burnside came for a private walkthrough. They had the soft, expensive look of people who said things like heritage matters and expected someone else to hold the ladder. Gavin waved me over from the mannequin table. "This is Claire," he said. "She steams and settles the garments. Absolute magician with a hem." Steams and settles. I had negotiated lender restrictions for the very cape they were admiring. I had spent 2 nights stabilizing bead loss on the gown his sponsor brochure called flawless. The woman smiled at me kindly in the way people smile at florists. "How lovely," she said. Gavin turned back to them. "As I was saying, once we secure the touring grant, the exhibition can travel under my office." Under my office. I stood there holding cotton gloves and realized he was not merely enjoying the status difference. He was rearranging authorship. Step by step. Title. Office. Public description. Then authority. That was the shape of it. He was clearing space where my work could remain while I disappeared. That night, I drove home later than usual. I lived alone in a small sandstone cottage in Norwood with a lemon tree that produced more fruit than scents. I put my bag on the kitchen chair and stood there in the quiet. Fridge, hum. Traffic 2 streets away. The tap I kept meaning to fix. My mother had been dead 5 years by then. No husband. No children. No one waiting to hear how my day went. That had frightened me once. By 44, it had become a kind of clarity. No audience. No performance. You tell yourself the truth, or you do not hear it at all. The truth that night was simple. Gavin was not finished. And I had been too polite for too long. The crates arrived on a wet Thursday morning. The kind of Adelaide rain that never commits but leaves every surface annoyed. I met the truck at the loading dock with Reuben, our preparator. Reuben was 29, broad-shouldered, careful with objects, and one of the few men in the building who did not confuse confidence with volume. He saw the signatures on the delivery sheet and frowned. Why is Gavin copied as movement-led? I took the clipboard and read it twice. He had inserted his office as project lead for Arrival. My name was still there, but secondary. That was new. "Because he wants photographs of himself opening crates," I said. Reuben snorted once. He knew I was only half joking. The Melbourne lender had sent a registrar named Nina Sethi. Compact. Alert. Dark hair pinned hard off her face. The kind of person who noticed when someone's gloves were powdered or not. We got along instantly because she respected the work and distrusted theater people in expensive jackets. During the intake, Gavin appeared in the dock doorway with Marianne Cole and a photographer. He said, "Perfect. We'll grab a few process shots." Nina looked up from the crate seal and said, "No cameras during acclimatization." Gavin tried to laugh it off. "It's internal. No cameras." 2 words. Flat. He backed away, but not before giving me a look that said I had somehow arranged his correction. Good. Let him think the world corrected him because of me. It would stop him looking at the actual machinery for a little longer. Once the crates were inside, Nina reviewed the movement file with me. She tapped the indemnity page. "You're still the named custodian." "Yes." She looked toward the corridor where Gavin's voice floated in from the foyer. "Keep it that way." That was hint number 2, and it came from someone outside the building. If a lender registrar tells you that, she is not making conversation. She is telling you the balance of trust in the room. That same afternoon, Gavin asked for my cobalt vault fob. It was a small oval tag attached to a black cord. Nothing dramatic, no grand brass key, just a coded access fob for the climate vault and restricted storage. Mine had a cobalt strip on it because facilities color-coded permanent custodians years earlier. I had worn it so long I stopped seeing it. He leaned in my new basement doorway while I was checking a lace collar under magnification. I need your access fob. For what purpose? So donor relations can move faster. Donor relations does not enter restricted storage. For this month it does. I put down the magnifier. The lender conditions are under my authority. He gave a little shrug. Authority is a flexible word in an institution. Not that weak, I thought. Not with indemnity lodged and a lender registrar still in town. Out loud I said, if the board wants to reassign custodian authority, it has to go through the register. He waved that away. Marianne says we're streamlining. That evening, I requested a formal copy of the current indemnity registration from the state office. I did not ask permission. I did not warn him. I simply asked for the latest lodged record and confirmation of movement obligations for the loan pieces. The reply came the next morning. You are listed as sole collection custodian for the Centennial Loan Program. Any temporary change requires written notice and lender consent before movement. Simple, dry, beautiful. I printed it and slid it into a cream folder. Then I waited. Because once people like Gavin decide a thing is beneath them, they stop learning about it. He escalated right on schedule. By Monday, my assistant had been reassigned to donor logistics. By Tuesday, Gavin had replaced the technical labels on 2 display drafts with language that sounded more cinematic and less true. By Wednesday, he sent a building-wide email thanking, quote, the events and development leadership team for carrying the exhibition forward. My name was not in it. Neither was Ruben's. Neither was anyone who had touched a textile, a mount, a humidity logger, or a crate seal. The final push came at the weekly staff briefing. We all stood in the dress circle because Gavin believes stairs made people more attentive. He had a tablet in one hand and Marianne beside him. The whole place smelled like polish and old carpet. Gavin smiled across the rows. As we move into Gala Week, all collection requests will route through my office for efficiency. I said, from 3 rows back, movement requests still require custodian sign-off. He looked directly at me. For now, the room shifted. Not loudly, just that tiny institutional shiver when everyone understands a line has been drawn and decides not to stand on it. Afterward, Tess Morgan found me in the corridor. Tess ran front of house. 32. Sharp fringe. Fast brain. Never talked more than necessary. She said, he's been telling donors the tour is already secured. It isn't. I know. She held my gaze. He also asked whether the vault cameras record after hours. That got my attention. Did you answer? I said ask security. Good woman. I went back downstairs, closed my basement door, and opened the cream folder again. Not because I had forgotten what was in it. Because sometimes before a storm, you need to touch the wall that is going to hold. I did not become brave all at once. People like to tell stories that way because it makes the middle easier. A woman gets enough. She rises. She speaks in one perfect paragraph. The room changes. That is not what happened. What happened was slower, more practical. I started keeping copies, emails, program drafts, movement schedules, credit mock-ups. Nothing stolen. Nothing dramatic. just the trail of decisions people make when they believe no one below them understands structure. I also started noticing who was uneasy. Reuben, obviously. Tess, in her tight, controlled way. Even Marianne Cole looked less certain as gala week closed in. She was board chair, but she was also vain. That mattered. Vanity makes people bold in public and nervous in records. The more Gavin promised, the more her eyes flicked to me in meetings as though I might smooth the practical edges of his confidence. I stopped smoothing. That was new for me. Not open rebellion, just the removal of my cushioning. If he made a claim, I did not translate it into real terms for him unless asked directly. If the board ignored a technical point, I let the silence stay where it landed. If he set a timetable that compressed acclimatization, I repeated the lender condition once and did not rescue him from how impatient it sounded. He mistook that for surrender. It was not surrender. It was the first clean thing I had done in months. 3 days before the gala, Gavin came to the lab with a black garment bag over one shoulder and my old office key in his hand. He set the key on the bench. "I'm giving your room to press." I looked at the key, then at him. "My room or the room beside the freight path that functions as movement control." He smiled. "See? That tone. This is why people struggle with you. People. Always people. Never a name. Never responsibility." He unzipped the garment bag halfway to show me the silver-embroidered opera coat we were planning to place at the center of the gala entrance. One of the Melbourne loans. It should have still been resting in controlled storage. My spine went cold. Why is that out? We're testing sightlines. Where is Nina? She left yesterday. And who signed the movement? He let the coat hang there a second longer before zipping it shut. "My office is coordinating movements now. Then your office is breaching lender conditions." He shifted the bag to his other arm. "Claire, you keep saying conditions as if the world ends in paperwork." "No, the world ends in paperwork when people move old silk to impress a sponsor." He stepped closer. "Give me the cobalt fob." The directness of it almost made me laugh. There it was at last. Not streamline, not support, not efficiency. Give me the thing that proves I can walk through the door you cannot. I touched the cord at my neck. You are not listed. I'm director level. You are not listed. For a moment, his face lost its shine. Not anger first, disbelief. He genuinely thought the building should rearrange itself around his title. Then he recovered. "All right," he said lightly. "Let's do this properly. Marianne wants a handover meeting at 4. That meeting was the fake defeat. I knew it the second I walked into the green room and saw Marianne at the table, Gavin at her right, and the printed agenda already laid out. Transition of operational access. Temporary events integration. Collections workflow. Carefully neutral phrases. The room smelled like old velvet and coffee gone bitter. Marianne folded her hands. "Claire, we're under pressure. Gavin needs smoother access to execute Gala Week." "Access to what?" "Restricted collection areas." "Under whose authority?" "Under institutional authority." There it was. The phrase people use when they do not understand the chain they are stepping into. I slid the printed state confirmation across the table. It named me as sole collection custodian for the loan program. Marianne read the first paragraph. Gavin did not. He said, "We can amend later." I said, "Not after movement." He said, "Then we'll say no movement." I looked at the garment bag by the wall. He had already moved one. The lie was so casual, it almost impressed me. Marianne glanced between us. "What do you propose, Claire?" I could have fought harder in that room. Raised my voice. Made it personal. I did not. Instead, I unclipped the cobalt fob and set it on the table. Not as transfer, as object. "Here is the fob," I said. "If you want to use beyond my authority, record that in writing and notify the state office and lender before any further movement." Gavin reached for it at once. Hungry men always reach too quickly. Marianne hesitated. "Claire." I stood. "If you want me present for any movement, call me. If not, minute that I objected." Then I left. That was the part he misread. He thought I had backed down because I did not make a scene. But silence is unreadable to people who only trust applause. At 6 that evening, I sent one short email to the State Indemnity Office and copied the lender. There has been an attempted internal reassignment of operational access during Gala Week. Please confirm no movement of listed pieces may occur without written custodian authorization from the registered officer. I attached nothing else. I did not accuse. I did not dramatize. I simply asked the system to say what it already knew. The gala began at 7. By 6:30, the building had changed its posture. Lights warmer, floors quieter, staff moving in lines instead of circles. The opera coat stood at the entrance under soft gold, exactly where it should not have been. I arrived through the side corridor and took my place near the staircase. Not in front, not hidden. Just within sight of the path everything important would have to take. Guests came in waves. Donors, sponsors, people who spoke about preservation as if it were a mood. Gavin moved among them with the ease of a man who believes the room exists to confirm him. Marianne stayed close enough to share that light without claiming it. Tess caught my eye once from the doors. A small nod. Everything was in motion. At 7:45, Gavin lifted a glass. "Before we begin the tour, a quick word about what this week represents." He spoke well. He always had. Language was his strongest tool and his weakest test. He thanked the board, the donors, the leadership team. He gestured toward the coat. "This piece traveled halfway across the world to be here tonight." That was the line. Travel, movement, declared in a room full of witnesses. I felt it settle. Not emotion, alignment, structure clicking into place. From the entrance, a voice said, "Mr. Hale." Not loud, not theatrical, but it cut cleanly through the room. People turned because of the tone, not the volume. Nina Ward stood just inside the doors with a man beside her in a dark suit carrying a slim folder. Gavin smiled, already performing. "Nina, back so soon?" She did not return the smile. "This is Mr. Ellis from the State Indemnity Office." The man inclined his head. "Good evening." Polite. Exact. Marianne stepped forward. "I'm afraid we're about to begin." Mr. Ellis raised a hand just enough to pause her. "This will be brief." He opened the folder. The room quieted in the way only expensive rooms do. Gradually, as people decide, silence is safer. "We received a notice this evening regarding a potential reassignment of operational access and movement of indemnified items." No accusation, no heat, just statement. He looked at the coat, then at Gavin. "Can you confirm whether this item was moved from controlled storage after registration?" Gavin's confidence held for half a second too long. "Yes, for display preparation." "Under whose authorization?" "My office." "Are you the registered collection custodian?" A pause. "Small? Fatal?" "No." Mr. Ellis nodded once. "Then the movement is not compliant with the indemnity conditions." He turned a page. "Until the lender confirms acceptance of that movement, the item is considered at risk under the agreement." He closed the folder. "This requires immediate correction." No one spoke. Because there is nothing to say when a structure removes your language. Marianne's face had gone very still. "Claire," she said, not loudly, but clearly enough. I stepped forward. Not quickly, not slowly, just on time. "The item returns to controlled storage now," I said. "To do that, I will need the vault cleared and a direct path from entrance to storage." No anger, no emphasis. Instruction. Gavin tried once more. "This is being handled." "No," said Nina. One word. "Final." Mr. Ellis did not look at him again, because he no longer existed in the process. Tess was already moving people aside. Reuben appeared at my shoulder with gloves. The room opened. Not for Gavin. For the work. We lifted the coat together, the way we had lifted everything that mattered in that building. Carefully. Without spectacle. As we passed him, Gavin said my name. "Claire?" I stopped. Not because he asked, because timing matters. He stepped closer. "You set this up." I looked at him the way you look at a measurement that finally makes sense. "I kept the record," I said. "That's all." Then I turned and continued down the corridor. In the vault, the air was cool and steady, the way it should be. We settled the coat back into its mount, checked the seams, logged the time, closed the case. No applause, no audience, just correction. By 9, the gala had resumed in a smaller, quieter shape. Marianne stood with Mr. Ellis near the side hall. Gavin was not visible. Tess handled the floor like nothing had broken. Reuben went back to his mounts. Later, Marianne found me by the service stairs. "I didn't understand the exposure," she said. "I do now." I nodded. She held my gaze a second longer. "We'll need to review leadership structure after this week." "You will." That was enough. No victory speech. No apology demanded. Structure does not need celebration, only acknowledgement. On Friday, my name was added back to the program. Not at the bottom, not as a courtesy, as collection custodian. Exactly where it had always been in the documents. The basement room stayed mine. The coat remained on schedule. The tour did not travel that month, or the next, because some things move only when the conditions are met. A week later, the cobalt fob hung at my neck again. Unremarkable. Small. Still the same object it had always been. The difference was not the fob. It was that everyone in the building now understood what it meant. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. He wanted access. I gave him process. And the process decided the rest.
Thank you for watching. If you'd like to hear more, you can follow this channel. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon to be notified when a new video is uploaded.